de terrorista, de violentista, porque defiendo nuestros derechos. De terrorista, de violentista, porque defiendo nuestros derechos.
So Meg is the earth. Nils. Cabo, the water, then Roma is the light.
Es el fuego, pero no hay hielo.
And then Kobina is the organization.
A los demás compañeros que estamos en las sillas, ya que no todos podemos participar por el tiempo, les vamos a pedir que se tomen de la mano.
For everyone else that is by these chairs, we can't have everyone participate because of the time, but we want everyone to hold each other's hands.
Entonces vamos a iniciar con el permiso de nuestra Pachamama.
And so we're going to start with the permission de nuestra Pachamama, of our Mother Earth.
Vamos a darle la palabra a nuestro... Vamos a darle la palabra a May para que pueda darnos su sentir de la tierra.
We're going to first give the word to Meg, who's going to tell us their feeling of what comes to them when they have the earth, what it means to them.
I guess like grounding and like a sense of how we're all connected, but that gives us the stability to move forwards.
Now for the water, for Cabo.
Give thanks. Holding the water, I'm from an indigenous clan from Kuumba or South Africa, Cape Town, and we are actually a water clan, so I feel at home right now. I feel happy basically. I feel, yeah, thank you. Like, did you know that? Why did you choose me for the water? So it's just like perfect, thank you.
Now the seed.
I think about the very collaborative efforts that would have been going on for a very long time, over many generations, to keep each seed variety going and grown and passed on.
And now the fire and the light. What does the light mean to you?
I said at the Dia de los Muertos interfaith event about the fact that sometimes to care means to fight, and I think that is the fire to me. It's the care that burns, and that burns us into action.
And the organization?
I think for me, it makes me think about the many different types of ways that people organise, and the need to respect what goes into organisation, to give thanks to everyone in it, but also to have very honest dialogue about what type of organisation we also all need.
Bien, entonces, como ya hemos iniciado con nuestra mística, vamos a pasar a hacer nuestro himno, que solemos hacer como Fe Mukarina.
So to start now, we're gonna start with our hymn that we have as our organization, the Fe Mukarina.
Mujer andina, vengo a contarte todas mis luchas y mis dolores. Mujer andina, vengo a contarte todas mis luchas y mis dolores. Cerros nevados he caminado solo por verte, mujer andina. Cerros nevados he caminado solo por verte, mujer andina. Hoy que me encuentro cerca la cárcel, con tal quisiera de que me acusan. Hoy que me encuentro cerca la cárcel, con tal quisiera de que me acusan.
I welcome you all to this gathering to this space to share in hope, to share in love, to share in the possibility that we can create a new world, a more loving, caring, nurturing world. Ganga, I thank you and all those who have contributed to you being here in this moment with us. I give thanks to the Great Spirit, of which we are all a part of. I give thanks to you, little spirits, from my little spirit, that we are more like than we are different. We are more like than we are different. We are more alike than we are different.
No, it's also like one of these examples that I think we was like learn quite a lot from in a world that like again is seeing quite a lot of movements for decolonization, self-determination in places like the Alliance of Sahel States, Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso, in Peru, Mexico, in many other places. And this also being the time of the year when many different cultural celebrations mark remembering of our ancestors, like Samhain, for example. And this day also coincides with what many people are marking as the International Day Against Fascism, so commemorating anti-fascist resistance throughout Europe. And yeah, particularly also seeing the far-right fascist violence on the streets in the summer, where we also like, we're thinking about how to frame today. And speaking of also learning from ancestors, like one of the people that we also really quite often lift up in our networks and organizing is the example of Sylvia Pankhurst, who was definitely the more radical of the Pankhurst family. But she was like one of the very, very early anti-fascist organizers in the UK, one of the people who sort of from a very early on saw the threat of fascism coming across Europe, particularly starting from Italy. And one of the things that she realized very early on was like international solidarity with the Italian fascist aggressions around the world, for example in Ethiopia, is 100% key to fighting the fascist threats across Europe.
Have been grateful to see the efforts gone into the Decolonial Open Communiversity. So we would first like to really welcome the real efforts in the very different and difficult conditions of the Preparatory Commission, who sit on my left, to my right, who have travelled from various parts of frontline struggles of colonised communities of resistance. So I'd like to just introduce them and then introduce the order, and we'll be hearing from our perspectives on decolonisation in particular and what the Preparatory Commission means, and practically therefore what does this process invite people into. And this is really important because we felt the need to make sure that at a time when a conversation about decolonisation and international solidarity is very mainstream, and these are things that you hear about in many different places, that we understand how much that discourse needs to be controlled and still understood from the real experiences of colonised community resistance who still have little to no visibility, particularly in this part of the world. And to do that, returning to the heritages of when we've done that before, when there's been the real commitment from peoples all around the world to commit to national and social liberation, and then to understand from everyone here how we understand those things, so that we can have very honest dialogue and hear clearly from each other about these perspectives. And so this is actually a very important space because we obviously know that we're at a time where militarization is the world order, and there's a very specific and strategic attempts to keep us apart, and to pull our narratives apart, and to isolate our struggles. And we are all to varying degrees complicit in this, and this is what we've been learning as part of the Decolonial Open Communiversity and developing new tactics about it. So when I get into that bit, I can talk particularly about movements that I represent, but would like to firstly introduce Brother Omar Farfan, who will then be followed by myself, then, no, she's the fourth, then Rosita, or Rosie, from Fenum Karinap, and then Rosita, and then Sister Piwaba from Azania, South Africa. So I hope that was clear. Thank you.
So thank you, Brother Covina. Welcome all to this session of the Open Decolonial Communiversity. My name is Omar Farouk. I come from a community radio station, a grassroots media collective in Mexico City, in the National School of Anthropology, which has existed since 20 years ago. This collective is founded on a student and workers and academics occupation of a part of the school where our cabins are located. So in this, our organization is a collective made of collectives. So I call them the factions, no? So different factions in a general assembly of the community radio. They work in a network of free media collectives in all of the what they call the Mexican country, and many of the other nation states of Abya Yala. So in my work in the collective is partly coordinating the different factions so they get along and we can all work together. And the occupation of the space is open for the community, for the student community, and for the barrios, no, the neighborhoods around the school, and for the local organizations, the community assemblies in the city, and the indigenous people's resistance movements, and every other emergency, that comes along. So this the organization has been doing this since 2021, and well, I wanted to take to tell you 3 stories, in this conversation. The last one will be about internationalist solidarity, and the second one will be about the attacks that we received from the government, the Mexican government, and the police in Mexico City against our network of organizations in September 5. And the first is going to be about our comrades who are disappeared. First of all, I wanted to speak what Brother Niles was telling you about. We, in our the places we come from, is we have knowledge of the long tradition of international solidarity in whatever they call the United Kingdom, and the struggle that people from here have fought in many places of the world, like the Guerra Civil Española, of the República Española, and when the internationalist peoples came and fought the Franquista imperial struggle, supported by international fascism. So we have always that in mind when we visit these lands. And going to the first team, just give me a second. And yesterday and the day before, I was telling a story about when I entered the university, because we were in the Oxford lands. So I mentioned in 2001, when Radio Zapote was founded in Mexico City, I was studying in the northeast of Mexico, in Monterrey, the Autonomous University of Nuevo León. So at that time, we founded a student organization, a student assembly, it was called. It was a really small collective. It went along. I left the city. I went to study to the National School of Anthropology. And this student assembly in Monterrey, in Nuevo León, in the north, it grew. It started appearing in many faculties, and they did a lot of work against the fees in the university. The fees must fall. And in 2008, 2009, as in Radio Zapote, we do a lot of work of making connections with organizations. We try to be present to offer anything that they may need in terms of communication, popular education, in terms of making their struggles known. So we were trying to get connected with this student assembly of Nuevo León, of Monterrey, of the University of Monterrey. So I had some reunions, with the students, with the new generations. We tried to work together. It didn't go far, we tried, and it happens. It may not happen. So in 2011, one of the students of the university from this organization, his name is Roy Rivera Hidalgo. He was disappeared by a paramilitary death squad in Monterrey City. being a student of sociology, in the faculty of philosophy and literature. And he was a member of this university student assembly. That night, the death squad came to his house. Then they were sleeping on the second floor. And in the first floor, it was his father. His father had something wrong with his foot. He was sick, he was on a wheelchair. So he couldn't go up the stairs to sleep, so the family slept upstairs and he in the living room. And so the paramilitary death squad, they come into the house, and they take everybody from the second floor to the first floor, and they say they were looking for someone. He wasn't there. So the death squad commander, or whatever he is, he told the mother of Roy, which one is the oldest from the children, from the sons? And Roy, he said, I'm the oldest. So they took him, and there's no more information about him, So the government has not made any development, about his case, the tribunals, the courts, the police, the federal police, the army, there's nothing, his mother, she funded an organization which is called the United Front, Las Fuerzas Unidas por Nuestros Desaparecidos Nuevo León, the United Forces for Our Disappeared in Nuevo León. So in 2011, this kind of story that I'm telling you, it happened massively, all along the country, the supposed country of Mexico. And now we can talk about an official number of somewhere between 150,000 and 200,000 disappeared since 2006 to up until now in Mexico by a narco war, as the officials call it. And in these times, 2011, 2012, people did not know how to deal with this. When I grew up on those neighborhoods, we had a somewhat normal life, with criminal activity. The police were corrupt, but you didn't have a black ops commando dressed in black with Kalashnikovs patrolling the neighborhoods in the night. That was absurd to think about that. If someone would have told us that in 2001, when Brother Zapote was founded, if someone had said that this was going to happen, we would not believe that, Never, It's the most absurd idea. But it started happening. And the people were not organized. They were not connected, and they had not political formation to deal with this. And the families, when your son is disappeared, you may have in the family the friends, the friends of your family, the friends you had always have, your neighbors, the people from your job, in the office, and you have your other family and your extended family. And when your son gets disappeared, they get scared. Everyone gets into this terror that is expanded along the community. So they stop talking to you. They leave you alone. This was happening in those times since 2006. It's been changing a little, Even more since the Ayotzinapa 43 disappeared in Iguala Guerrero, which is another story for the next session, maybe. But this was maybe the worst part of this state terrorism, that the terror in the people left you alone. Because if the friend of your family, he thinks that you are in trouble and someone is attacking your family, he does not want to be seen with you. And if he is seen talking with you, he is thinking that a paramilitary death squad is going to come to his house at night and they will take his son or his daughter, or everyone. So they stopped talking to the families. And the families, they got organized and they had to do it. There was no other choice. And these were normal families. These were normal families. They were not militants. They were not from the unions. They were not from the Communist Party. They were not from nothing. They were just people. And they had to make an organized response. And it was the mothers, The mothers got organized. So in Nuevo León, in Coahuila, in Jalisco, in Tamaulipas, all along the nation, the so-called nation, the organizations started growing. They started getting networking, in a big network. So the 10th of May of this year, 4 big federations of the organizations from the families of the disappeared, they presented themselves as a united front, because the government of López Obrador from the Morena party, and the last government from the PRI party, and the last government for the PAN party, they were all exactly the same in their absolute complicity with the massive disappearance of our people, and with the complicity of the army, the Mexican army, with the supposed organized crime, with the cartels, and with the local police and with the state police in this humanitarian crisis, no? So the organizations were demanding that the militarization of our territory stopped, but the government promised, no, that they were going to stop it, and they did exactly the contrary of that, no? So in the last 3 months, the National Guard, no, which was like the federal police force that was looking for the communities, there was a constitutional reform that delivered the authority of the National Guard to the army, no, to the Defense National Secretary. No? So the total militarization of our country has been implanted, and we know that this is with the objective of permitting the extractivism of our national resources and the subjugation of our people. No? So I took a little too many minutes. ¿Cuántos son? Well, so going back to the beginning, when we founded this organization, when the students and the academics and the workers of the University of the National School of Anthropology, they got together to expropriate this space for making a community radio that was in service of the people. Somehow it's like they knew what was going to happen to us, because this emptiness that I'm talking about, that when something like this happens, you are left alone. When you are working in an organization, many will know that if someone close to you gets assassinated by the government or the army or the narcos or whoever, there's a terror that leaves you alone as an organization, no? As a collective, as a group, as the people from the union. People get scared, no? And they stop. They do like nothing happens, no? So this kind of organizations, these free media collectives, they presented an important work to deal with this reality, which was getting worse, no? Since 2006 up until now. We can say that the last year it was worse than the last year, and the last year was worse than the last year in terms of the frequency, no? Of the rate or the quantity of people that are getting disappeared, that are getting assassinated, and the quantity of journalists that are getting assassinated and menaced, and the quantity of land defenders that are getting assassinated, no? Mostly always from indigenous nations. So this year in the September 5, we had a protest at the Alcaldía de Xochimilco. And in this protest, a group organized of thugs, they attacked the people that were manifesting themselves. And they were coordinated with the police in the Xochimilco Alcaldía in Mexico City. And they arrested 5 people, the thugs along with the police. They got them and they disappeared them for 4 hours until we discovered that they were in the Fiscalía de Tlalpan in Mexico City. So we convened, all the network of organizations convened to go to the Fiscalía of Tlalpan to protest and to demand for the people to be freed, no? Since they were detained arbitrarily. And when they got to the Fiscalía, when the protest was happening, the special forces from the police of Mexico City attacked the manifestation. So we already had from Xochimilco 20 wounded and 5 arrested. So when they attacked in the night in Tlalpan, we had another 30 wounded, and many of them were of grave, no? Serious injuries, no? One of them, a student of the National University of Mexico, while they were hitting him, they took his clothes off, so he was left in the ground, naked and with all full of blood. No, another compa from the media collectives, while they were hitting her, they took her clothes from the torso, no, leaving her naked, no. Which constitutes a sexual aggression against her, and this kind of aggressions, there were many. There was a report by Article 19 and other organizations that defend journalists and land defenders. And at this moment, something really amazing happened. No? Even if that big attack from the special forces of the police of Mexico City, which their commanders are trained in Tel Aviv, by the occupation forces of the Zionist entity. People did not get scared. They knew, no, we were reporting it, and they knew what had happened, and they still came to the Fiscalia to support us. So 100 people appeared in less than an hour, and the government had to let them go, no? And the 5 people that were detained, no? They were selected as leaders from various organizations, including the Otomi community of Mexico City, and the Anticapitalista Coordinadora Antipatriarcal, and one of our comrades from Radio Zapote, Estefania Galicia, which she is called Mayahuel, and 2 students from sociology of the National State University. No? So the organizations, they created a united front against repression and police brutality, and they are demanding the government that this for justice against this repression, and for the judicial persecution to stop. But our compa, Mayahuel from Radio Zapote, she has been menaced by the local mafia in Xochimilco. No? Her life is in danger, and she had to leave her indigenous territory in Xochimilco from the Nahua Xochimilca people, and be somewhere else, no? where she is more safe, no? Being a journalist, no? A free media collective journalist. So she's also facing judicial persecution, no? From that day. So I wanted to join, no? What happened in 2001 until now, just so as I could make the argument to you that when we're talking about international solidarity, we are not meaning some kind of, no, as someone asked the day before now, no, some kind of charity, no. I am not talking about this. I am not telling you the story because I'm asking for help or something like that. We are on the front line and we are doing our work. We took the responsibility, the organizations, not me, and it's been many years of this work, no? And it's even expected of us, no? If something happens and people go to the front line from the resistance, and the organizations are not there, then they will ask you, no? Hey, where were you? No? Are you sick or something? Are you okay? But the people from the Free Media Collective, they chose the work. They know why. They have their motivations, and they may purify their intentions to do it. But the fact that we do it is also an international solidarity. So we are from Mexico City. No, we are from urban, rural areas. We do not support the struggles that are fighting all day in their communities against these death squads, against these narcos, against the government, to stop the mining company. We are integrating ourselves. We are with the struggle, fighting with them. So that's what I said the other day, no, that we have a foot on the front line. And we may go and go to the resistance process, but we go back. No? We go back to our house, and the community is left with the fight. No? So we can only support so much. And in terms of financing, the collective, no, the free media collectives, we put our own money into the struggle. So we have to pay for the microphones, we have to pay for the internet, we have to pay for the, no? And it's not, we're not giving charity to the organizations. We are in the same struggle. So when we tell someone what is happening with us, and what is happening in the other nations of Abya Yala and all of the terror that has been implemented by this industrial military complex and the mining companies and all of them, and the imperialist factual forces, we're telling you, so you may meditate upon this and choose how and when and where and will you participate in the struggle, or if you can't, no? So when they ask about charity, it's really, really absurd to us, no? And I think that's all I wanted to tell you. Thank you.
So, thank you again for sharing. And I wanted to lead off following on from what Brother Omar had said, and particularly making sure that we don't define decolonization outside of the violence and the mass atrocities that are happening on a daily basis across the world. But I also wanted to connect that to this conversation that we've had in various places about international solidarity, and we had a session that was about decolonizing international solidarity, because people were asking questions about, but is this aid, or is this what's the difference? And we realized that there's a lot of work that needs to be done at the level of studying truly what has been done and what do we mean by national and social liberation, and how do we understand these ideas of justice and freedom, and what we've heard from Brother Omar, there's a lot of clarity from our indigenous colonized communities of resistance that it's about a total sovereignty free from colonial domination, it's free from the colonial rule, it's free from the governments that have been imposed on our lands, the borders that have been put there and have carved up our communities. And what's quite impressive is that, as Neil said, today commemorates what would have been Basil Davidson's birthday. Is that correct? Baby. Because Basil Davidson was from Bristol, and he was a historian. Actually came out of the colonial office. So that's actually what his formal training was. And Basil Davidson, we're trying to push, particularly from our movements, that his name also be reclaimed in Ghana, because he took it upon himself, having learned the reality of what's actually happening in Africa in the name of Europeans, to do something about it and put his skills in service of the struggle. And he earned the respect of community organizations, freedom fighters on the ground, for doing as he was told and actually managing to provide effective assistance to the struggles on the ground. He wrote a book called Black Star, which was, I think actually ends up being one of the best biographies on Kwame Nkrumah. And I'm speaking here today on behalf also of the Pro-Nkrumah Unity Movement, which is based across West Africa. And that book goes into very much a lot of detail about how the British press and the Western press systematically demonized and labeled him as terrorist, a scary person that was going to change Africa's course and stop the West having its total dominance and control over African people, that he was a threat that had to be eliminated by all costs. He talks about this. He knew this way back then, and yet we still have an issue when we raise the struggles of our peoples and what is necessary to be done for the liberation that is in the heart of very many ordinary young people across the continent, that we're told to take out the violence from the language, or we're told to give trigger warnings, or we're even told to hide the fact that it is those of us who inhabit this part of the world who are complicit in that crime on a daily basis. And yet, when we share things about it and we promote the visibility of these struggles, they are taken as if this is information that can be got on any day of the week. We had that conversation about international solidarity, and it's great that Basil Davidson can be an example we can focus on because he did that work. And particularly, it's relevant because we're at a particular time in history where all the tactics that he was already exposing are coming back, and we're seeing it broad daylight. So World War III has started, military industrial complex is doing what it does, and there's total media silence as far as most of European media is concerned. We don't really understand why environmental movements are unable to talk about the military industrial complex, because that is obviously clearly the most systematically well-organized carbon polluter and destroyer of Mother Earth. But there's total silence about this industrial complex. There's total silence about the billions that were managed to be found just recently to support a death trap project in Ukraine, to support resistance there,
when schools are crumbling here and we're saying that there can be no money found for solidarity efforts. We don't understand this. And if we looked at history and we had studied this, we'd understand that there's a political playbook that fascism and imperialism, which we should name properly, is playing from. Back in the 50s and 60s, after the so-called Second World War ended, it was the Labour Party that came into power in this country. I think it was Harold Wilson in particular that I'm talking about, who also targeted Kwame Nkrumah, who saw him as an independence leader that couldn't be ignored, and took a policy out to make sure that Kwame Nkrumah should be neutralised. That was the formal phrase used in the reports that are in the public domain. That was the British Labour Party, a party of British workers, so-called. So if we don't take seriously the information that's being shared, once again, all of these things will take place again, and we'll be unable to do anything about it. And someone the other day also raised a very important question about, what I understand about international solidarity is that we must resist here. It was a very good, serious contribution that he was talking about how they've been organising in Oxford. But we also said the point is, if you listen carefully, the question is, what resistance is useful? Particularly if we know imperialism is globally coordinating its efforts and moving its chess pieces around whenever it wants. It can pull a bit of resources from here, pull a bit of resources from here. Which battles are we trying to win, and how can we support movements so we can celebrate examples that take us all further forward collectively together? This is part of the process of what we've been thinking about as part of this Decolonial Open Communiversity. And I mentioned the Labour Party, that policy of the Labour Party, and we're seeing what's happening in the British political system because when particularly it was people who came back from the Second World War that saw that this country was in collapse and they're not going to accept it. They almost spilled their blood in other foreign lands to come back to have no respect for themselves here, that they took it upon themselves to make demands upon the government in this country. And this is where the welfare system in this country comes out of. That welfare system, of course, took the labour, of course, largely of Commonwealth labour to build it and to build its structure. That's a lot embedded into the history of Bristol. But at the very same time, to fund that project, they put down market women. They literally went into market women in Nigeria and raised them to the ground when they were rising and fighting against the tax rises that were being imposed on them by the British Colonial Office in Nigeria. So if you know the name of Fela Kuti, who in the African struggle is a historic edutainer who led resistance through music and popular education, it was his mother, Fumilayo Kuti, who raised him into struggle and was part of those efforts to lead market, unsalaried, organised women against those tax cuts, and saw hundreds of them literally raised to the ground and killed for those efforts. And this is what we're struggling against. So if we don't have clarity about that, then we also end up wasting a lot of resources in activities that aren't effective. And this is why we've committed ourselves, particularly one of the commitments coming out of the Preparatory Commission is to be, how do we focus on that learning together in lifetime, and what particularly do we need in terms of strengthening those connections? I'll try and keep it short, because what comes out of that is then a systematic few decades of the transformation of Africa into becoming a puppet garden to fund primary materials and export these primary materials to the so-called First World. So in the country where my parents come from, in Ghana, one of the key ones is gold and timber. They have found oil and lithium and other stuff, so that's also particularly fucked. But the gold is something that we're seeing has now peaked, once again, national interest. In September, the first series of national demonstrations were called, particularly around the democratic crisis, knowing that we're going into an election process, which we'll talk about. And then in October, another national level demonstration was coordinated and organised for mass mobilisation around the gold mining crisis. We've got to a point in Ghana, because of this imperial legacy, where they expect that by 2030 we'll be importing water, totally, in a country that has more than enough water and river bodies and water bodies that used to be pure, flowing from the mountains. So this is the crisis that's beheaded behind the surplus resources that get extorted here. And we'll come also to the surplus resources in the breakout groups about how do we restitute resources, how do we direct them. These national demonstrations were called and included faith mobilizations. The faith community, the Catholic Church has led calls for all church leaders to mobilize into the streets. I know our colleagues have been organising, particularly in defence of local indigenous communities, but particularly now we have to call out the fact that the government has seen this as an opportunity to deploy more military across the country as an attempt, they say, to criminalise artisanal miners, which are the people who are just trying to get crumbs by on the whatever mining or gold they can. And the other interconnection to this is that we know that whenever world war escalates, then people shelve their securities into gold. So the gold price goes up. So you've got this trap of people being desperate to get by and a global demand for gold that has to be extracted from somewhere. And that's all because of the war that is in this country, that is being funded, escalated, and produced from centres of power like this. So we know where the centres of power within our own indigenous colonised communities are, who are actually stopping the harm, who have actually in the last month have dragged out these corporate bosses from gold mining companies and dragged them into the streets and told them you're not going to mine in our countries anymore. But we weren't yet organised enough for that information to reach and for there to be the active response so that they can see those struggles. And those people who are now, some of them are being imprisoned, we also can bring out their names. In there was a win, by the way. But the overall context of this is that when we talk about decolonisation, we are very clear that there are live struggles and live battles that are on the ground. These are our struggles here because they're our resources which are funding them, and we need to move away from seeing them as that is something that's happening over there. We need to follow them. We need to understand that when those things win, the changes that will happen and the necessary collapse that has to happen out of that will be a victory for people. And we need to challenge the very bourgeois hidden narratives, like, which are infiltrating this collapse movement, which is talking about how can we also project and secure these resources for themselves. Because if we liberated territories of the world, we could very easily just share resources like we wanted to in the first place. And this is why it's important that we also can support the new development of a political economy based on reparatory justice, where we know those people that we're getting those resources from. This is all part of the learning process that our communities are developing. Now on December the 7th, we will have the Ghana elections. Some of you will know that we've been supporting the Ghana and Planet Repairs Action Dialogue platform, who have been working in various communities in supporting indigenous communities to make sense of alternative opportunities for planet repairs. Now it's very much coming out very clearly that this is going to be one of the easy pretexts for a lot of violence. When elections get called, violence happens. This just happens. But there's a growing recognition that the two leading parties in the country and the parliamentary system, the Western parliamentary system which we have, doesn't serve us. So there's a lot of clarity around the development of an alternative. On December the 7th, we are preempting that violence, and so we're also calling for active support and monitoring of the situation on the ground from an election, from a monitoring session that will be happening on that day, on December the 7th in the UK. But that's very relevant. We have to see the role of that election as part of the political process of this country. We have to understand that there is a coordinated effort of taxpayer resources to go into suppression of the information that we're sharing right now. There is a coordinated effort that has been charged now by the US General of AFRICOM, or the African Command, which they call it the African Command, to take back the coast of West Africa as an urgent need of Western civilization. We need to call these things out and see these and share these things when we see them and make sure people know that these facts are happening right now, so that we don't pretend like we're not actively involved in a war, and every day that we're not in struggle, we're not letting that war go on ahead without any challenges. This is the challenge really of this session, for us to have dialogue about that, but that's what I can share for now. Thank you.
Tarde Hankunapa, Sutime Julia Rosita, Nyujaja Kamuni Peruyastamanta, Nyujaja Kani Femukarinab, Nyujapas Kaipija Yakashkani Yapan Yachtakunaja Rimamusunchik. Bueno, muy buenas tardes con todas y todos. Disculpen, me olvidé traducir. Mi nombre es Julia Rosita, soy de Perú, del sur de mi país, del departamento de Apurímac, de la provincia de Andahuaylas, de la comunidad Quechua. Soy chanca, soy indígena, soy quechahablante y soy de la Federación Nacional de Mujeres Campesinas, Artesanas, Indígenas, Nativas, Asalariadas del Perú. Gracias.
Hello, my name is Julia Rosita. I'm from the south of Peru, from the department of Apurimac, from Andahuaylas. I'm Quechua and also Chanca, and also I speak Quechua, and I'm also the part of the National Federation of Native, Indigenous, Artisanal, Peasant, non-wage worker women of Peru. I'm going to just be doing the translation, so yeah. I'm going to start by sharing a bit about the stories about how it is as indigenous communities we've been resisting. We as peoples, we've been resisting against this system for years. First, conserving our cultures, our self-determination as peoples, through which this system has imposed rules that has taken away our faculty to decide about our lands. But many of us, we've been dispossessed by our lands, and we've had to recover our lands, where we produce our lands, where we look after our animals, we conserve our biodiversity, and from one way or another, they've imposed an education where they make us humiliated, marginalize us, and discriminate us. Just for speaking an indigenous language like Aymara, Quechua, Shipibo-Conibo, Wampis. We're in a country where Spanish has become, but our languages, we need to recover them and conserve them. And so that is a constant struggle that we as indigenous peoples, we have to do. We need an education that the government gives us. No. We need an education where the state doesn't impose on us. We need it from our own languages. From where the communities.
Bien, estaba mencionando un poco la educación, de cómo nosotros como comunidades tenemos que sentirnos obligados a una educación que el Estado brinda, ¿no? Una educación con sus propios reglamentos, una educación en donde ni siquiera muestran la historia real de nuestro pueblo, de nuestro Perú. Entonces, un ejemplo claro a esto, yo vengo de una comunidad campesina, de una comunidad quichua, en donde yo he estudiado la escuela hasta 3er grado y me lo han enseñado mis profesores en ese entonces, e indígenas, en donde ellos tienen que viajar 8 horas, 6 horas, para poder llegar a la comunidad. Cuando yo tuve que emigrar a la ciudad por la calidad de educación que me brindaban en mi comunidad, me he sentido obligada y me han obligado a dejar de hablar mi propia lengua, a dejar de portar mi propia cultura, mi propia identidad, en donde me han impuesto normas, en donde nos tienen como decir, aprendan lo que nosotros les vamos a brindar, pero no conocer más de eso. Y entonces es como pueblos en donde nosotros hasta la actualidad pues estamos en una lucha en donde estamos recuperando nuestra identidad, nuestras lenguas, nuestra cultura, donde no permitimos que este sistema colonial, capitalista nos siga arrebatando, porque muchos pueblos como los míos y otros pueblos de África, Asia y el Abya Yala en general estamos resistiendo ante este sistema que día a día nos está matando, desapareciendo. Y entonces los pueblos indígenas como Abya Yala, o sea, nos cuesta día a día estar enfrentando este sistema que cuando levantamos una voz o cuando reclamamos un derecho, lo primero es matarnos, desaparecernos. Entonces, estamos contra un sistema, luchando constantemente, un sistema en donde que nos impone sus reglas, incluso en el ámbito de la salud, donde nosotros como pueblos no tenemos, digamos, las infraestructuras adecuadas para la salud. Nosotros sobrevivimos a través de nuestra medicina natural, nuestra medicina que nos han dejado nuestros ancestros. A través de ello combatimos a este sistema capitalista colonial. Y también, como organización, nosotras pues vamos contra ese sistema como mujeres, porque la FEMUCARINAP nace en un espacio en donde las mujeres necesitamos capacitarnos, empoderarnos, porque sí tenemos la capacidad como mujeres de poder crecer, ejercer y tomar cargos políticos en donde nosotras podemos llevar nuestras políticas públicas desde la mirada de los pueblos indígenas del Abya Yala. Entonces la FEMUCARINAP aquí juega un rol importante como mujeres, porque nosotras como semillas nos vamos formando en donde no solo estamos viendo el sistema futuro, sino de cómo recuperar nuestro pueblo, de cómo defender a nuestra madre tierra, de cómo defender a nuestra Pachamama, de cómo enfrentar a este cambio climático que nosotros como pueblos los vamos haciendo. Por años hemos adaptado y hemos mitigado, hemos combatido a esto, a lo que nosotros como humanos constantemente contaminamos y hacemos de lo que querramos con el mundo. Entonces nosotras como pueblos, como mujeres, como indígenas, estamos en este sistema. Y otro punto es que también mi país se encuentra hasta el día de hoy en pie de lucha. Nosotros vamos enfrentando a un gobierno genocida, asesino, que tiene más de 84 muertos, sin contar los colaterales, pero es un gobierno que nosotros decimos que es una señora que ha usurpado una posición a la cual ingresó un presidente que nosotros como pueblo hemos elegido, que nos ha costado incluso en la primera vuelta hacer que ese voto sea respetado, porque en la primera vuelta, cuando ingresó un presidente, un hijo del pueblo, un campesino, el sistema opositor dijo que los pueblos indígenas, las mujeres indígenas, no sabemos votar, que no sabemos elegir, que no sabemos pensar. Sin embargo, nosotras como mujeres tenemos más capacidad, más conocimiento y más inteligencia que estos sistemas que día a día nos hacen ver minoritarios como si no supiéramos pensar, como no supiéramos valorar. Entonces, día a día, pues, nosotros vamos con este sistema y nos ha costado durante 1 año y medio mantener a nuestro presidente, a quien se llama Pedro Castillo, quien hoy es, por decir, es un preso político, porque está siendo actualmente encarcelado por injusticias, porque ni siquiera en su gobierno se le ha encontrado corrupción, no hay prueba suficiente. Y el día en donde él, un 7 de diciembre, da un comunicado porque el pueblo le ha pedido, porque el pueblo le dijo: señor presidente, cierre ese congreso, porque tenemos un poder legislativo que saca leyes en contra de los pueblos, leyes que nos quitan nuestros derechos como pueblos. Entonces el presidente hizo caso al pueblo, en donde nosotros como pueblo pedíamos ayuda, pero lamentablemente este sistema pudo más, y lamentablemente él se encuentra preso, donde él, a una diferencia corta de decir, el día que lo tuvieron que detener, lo detuvieron peor que un delincuente, con armamentos, podríamos decir con tanquetas de militares, como si él iba a huir. A diferencia, si hablamos de Alberto Fujimori, que él sí es un genocida, que ha asesinado, que él ha muerto yéndose, digamos, sin pagar su condena, de haber hecho tanto, de haber dejado tanto dolor en los pueblos, fue detenido de manera indiferente. Entonces, nosotros como pueblos, cuando nos empezamos a levantar, empezamos a salir en protesta, empezaron a asesinar a nuestros hermanos, a nuestros hijos. Y tal vez yo como joven podría decir que recién en este momento sentí el golpe de lo que tal vez mis padres, mis ancestros, mis madres lo sintieron en su momento, cuando tuvieron que enfrentar a los primeros gobiernos que nos estuvieron gobernando. Y es un dolor impotente, es una frustración que nos lleva a buscar, a que tengamos que articularnos, a que tengamos que seguir luchando con un sistema que nos quiere tener sumisos ante sus pies, ¿no? Entonces, eso es la manera de cómo como pueblos indígenas del Abya Yala vamos resistiendo contra este sistema, ¿no? Y cómo las mujeres también, pues estamos resistiendo. Y sabemos que las mujeres somos el pilar, y podría decir que somos los que jugamos el rol importante desde el imperio incaico. Nosotras como mujeres éramos las cuidadoras hasta el día de hoy, somos cuidadoras de nuestra madre tierra, somos las que inculcamos las culturas, somos las que nos dedicamos a la artesanía, somos las que damos, o sea, hacemos miles de cosas. Entonces, somos nosotras. Y algo que siempre he escuchado y decía, que sin nosotras no habría un mundo quien avance. Entonces, creo que nosotras estamos aquí como organización, como FEMU Carinab, para compartirles no solo nuestra historia de cómo como pueblos vamos resistiendo, no solo cómo vamos recuperando nuestra cultura, nuestras lenguas, nuestras tradiciones, nuestra autodeterminación, nuestra propia identidad, nuestra propia autonomía, no, sino que estamos en un proceso de una construcción de una red, de una solidaridad internacional a la cual nosotras llamamos, de cómo vamos a trabajar, de cómo vamos a hacer que este proyecto avance. No queremos una solidaridad internacional colonializada, que mantenga el ámbito colonial, se podría decir. No queremos. Queremos una solidaridad internacional en donde nuestras voces sean escuchadas, en donde se podría decir que respeten nuestra forma de trabajo, nuestra forma de resistencia, no a que vengan a imponernos de que tenemos que trabajar así o tiene que ser así, no, sino de que respeten de cómo podemos articular, pero respetando como pueblos de cómo vamos avanzando y cuál es nuestra lucha, qué cuán importante es nuestra resistencia como pueblos indígenas ante este sistema. Y otro punto también es de que nosotros, como jóvenes aquí pendiente, nosotros vamos viniendo de otros eventos anteriores y hemos visto mucha presencia joven, y esto es importante, pero no solo estén aquí sentados para escuchar nuestra historia, para escuchar nuestra resistencia, para escuchar nuestra lucha, para escuchar de cómo como pueblo vamos avanzando, no, sino decirles que tomemos un poco de conciencia de cómo queremos empujar esta solidaridad internacional, de cuáles son las estructuras, de herramientas para poder crecer, y de que esto no solo sea aquí en Europa, sino se expanda en el mundo, porque aquí, los que estamos aquí frente como pueblos, no somos Abya Yala, sino está África, está Asia, y estarán, digamos, otros continentes que no pudieron llegar, pero somos nosotros quienes estamos llevando esta voz de compartir cada compañero, cada compañera con toda su resistencia, con todo de cómo es su lucha. Entonces, pedirles tal vez de cómo podemos articular, de que sentemos cabeza, de que despertemos de esas hojas de laurel donde aún pensamos que este sistema capitalista, colonialista aún pueda manejarnos, aún pueda dominarnos. Y decir como pueblo que así como por años estamos resistiendo, aún no nos han ganado y aún no hemos perdido la batalla. Seguiremos resistiendo, cueste lo que cueste, como decimos, y que nuestras demandas en nuestros países sean escuchadas aquí, porque eso es la solidaridad, que cuando nosotros como país estamos demandando de que aquí nos están matando, de que aquí nos están quitando nuestros derechos, sean escuchados en Reino Unido, en otros países, en África, en Asia, y así cuando pase en África o en Asia, también en Perú se ha escuchado. Y es una manera de solidaridad porque podemos pronunciarnos, podemos ir a las embajadas, hacer incidencia política y decirles, compañeras, compañeros, no están solos, los estamos escuchando y desde aquí los estamos apoyando. Entonces, eso es la solidaridad que tal vez queremos empujar, en donde todos nos sintamos unidos, de que tal vez hoy somos pocos, pero somos más. Y entonces esa voz, al escuchar en otros países y decir, tú no estás sola, compañera, te estamos escuchando, a nosotros como pueblos nos ayuda a que sigamos resistiendo, a que no importa cómo nos estén matando, pero sabemos que estamos enseñando a nuestras nuevas generaciones de cómo tienen que luchar. Si nosotros no logramos esa victoria de que queremos un mundo diferente, sin capitalistas, sin colonialismo, lo harán las generaciones a los que les estamos inculcando, a los que les estamos dejando una enseñanza de lucha y resistencia. Entonces, yo creo que tejer una red de solidaridad se enfoque en eso, se enfoque en que respetemos nuestra propia autonomía, nuestra propia libertad, nuestra propia equidad como pueblos. Y nomás terminar con esto, como decimos en Perú, el pueblo unido jamás será vencido. Nosotros que somos los jóvenes, los portavoces, los agentes de esperanza, sigamos en este proceso, somos semillas que vamos a ir floreciendo, brotaremos, daremos fruto, pero daremos y demos fruto de resistencia, porque nuestro dolor es como decir, su lucha es mi lucha, mi dolor es tu dolor y tu dolor es mi dolor, y se trata de eso, porque los pueblos tenemos que enmarcar y unificarnos así, porque si tú nunca vas a entender mi lucha, si tú no vas a entender mi dolor, entonces estás perdiendo tiempo. Entonces yo creo que estamos en un contexto en donde podamos crecer, en donde podamos unificarnos y podamos sentir cada lucha. Y bueno, sigamos, como dije ayer o antes ayer, somos los pueblos indígenas, el Abya Yala, Asia y África y otros pueblos, somos el páramo. Nos podrán arrancar, pero volveremos a brotar, porque esto es la resistencia. Existimos porque resistimos, existimos porque hay resistencia, y entonces continuemos y les invitamos también a todas, a todos, a que empecemos a tejer redes de alianza y de acá no nos vayamos solo con lo que han escuchado, sino váyanse comprometidos de que hay mucho por qué trabajar, hay mucho que decir y hay mucho que cambiar en este mundo tan colonialista y capitalista. Muchas gracias.
So I was mentioning the education of how, as we as communities, we are obliged to an education in which they don't show the real story of our peoples and the story of Peru. For example, a clear example is I come from an indigenous Quiche community. I studied in a school and where our teachers had to travel even 8 hours for them to come to the community. But when I had to migrate to the city, I felt obliged to stop speaking my own language and carry on my own culture. They imposed on us a system that made us not value what we learned in our communities. They made us know that they made us feel like we didn't need to know about ourselves. So now we have a struggle where we are taking back our cultures, where the system continues and fight the system that continues to take our cultures as we are resisting as indigenous communities. And right now we are building ties with communities in Africa, in Asia, and in Abya Yala. So as communities we are struggling and we are raising our voices, but when we raise our voices they kill us. And this is a struggle that we continue to do and we continue to fight. We've also been struggling against their imposition of this health system that they have imposed upon us, because we have survived for generations through our traditional medicine systems, and through that we have confronted this system. And also us as an organization of women, we struggle because, for example, in the Fenmukarinap, we want people to know that as women, we have the capacity to also take on a political struggle. We have a capacity to take on a political role and also to determine our destinies, in which we can also take politics from our indigenous communities and push them forward. And we know we have an important role to play as women in this fight. And so we need to see how we begin to also, as women, begin to take back our lands and also build up our people, and how we confront even this climate change. And so for years we have combated what as humans have also caused in terms of contamination. And so we continue to fight as our communities. Today my country is in a struggle. We have been confronting a government, a traitorous government, that has resulted in over 80 assassinations of our people when the young people stood up to fight. We call her an usurper and a traitor. Dina Boluarte is a president that someone and is the president and a dictator that is coming to power to replace a president that the people elected. We needed our vote to be respected. And so this system, basically, it came against our people. When the people went out to vote and actually elected who they wanted to elect, the system said that women and peasants, they didn't have the knowledge to actually vote for someone that they believed in. They abused us and they treated us as if we don't even know how to think. And so for a year we have been struggling to support Pedro Castillo, who is a current political prisoner. And there is no proof of the crimes that they say that he has committed, but he is sitting in administrative detention because the people asked him to close the Congress, because for generations the Congress hasn't worked because the judicial system doesn't serve the people. And so when he listened to the people, they put him in prison. They came and they treated him as though he was a criminal. They came with long arms to capture him, instead of how they treated, for example, real criminals and genocide people that have committed genocide against our peoples, like Fujimori, who were detained in a civil matter. And so as communities, when we begin to go out and protest as young people, what I felt was the pain of what my fathers and what my mother and also all those that had come before had also faced when they had to face the first governments that had come into power. And so it is those frustrations and pain that make us now know that we have to fight a system. We have to fight this system that wants us to be submissive. This is why, as communities and as women, we are resisting. And we know that as women, we are a pillar. Because even from the Incaico times, we have been defenders of our Mother Earth. We cultivate our families. We make artisanal goods. We are pillars in our communities. Without us, the world wouldn't advance. We are here as a Fenmukarina. Not just to share our story of how we are recovering our cultures, our lands, and our autonomy, but we are in the process of constructing a network of international solidarity, which we want you also to join into. We don't want a colonial solidarity. We don't want a solidarity where you pretend to listen to our voices, but where there isn't respect for the ways of our resistance. We don't want imposition of how we should resist, or because we want you to understand how important our struggle is as indigenous people against this system. As youth, we have seen the presence of youth also engaged in these struggles over the last few days. But we don't want you just to be sitting here and listening to our resistance, but we want you to actually go out and advance this struggle. We have to take this consciousness out and actually push forward this international solidarity. And we want you to think about what are the structures to actually engage with this global struggle, not just in Abya Yala, but also in Africa and Asia. We are taking our voice, we are bringing this voice and sharing our struggle with you. And I want to ask you about how you can, and we need to begin to actually articulate and start waking up at all levels and stop thinking about this capitalist system and stop allowing it to dominate us. We haven't lost. We will continue resisting and our demands will be heard. And so when these countries come and they say that they're going to take our rights away, we need it to be heard in all places. We need to be heard across the borders. That is the solidarity. And so, for example, when stuff is happening to us in our communities in Abya Yala, for example, you hear it here, but they also hear it in Africa, in Asia, and in other parts. And when also stuff happens in Africa and in Asia, we begin to hear about it in Abya Yala, and we can go to the embassies and we can make people know that they are not alone, that we are supporting one another, and that there is real international solidarity, that we feel united, and that maybe today, maybe we seem like little, but we have to commit ourselves to be many more, and hear from the other communities and peoples to know that they are actually listening and that they are uniting in this struggle. And this has to strengthen our struggle. It doesn't matter if they are killing us. It doesn't matter if they are murdering us. We must show the next generation how to fight. That is our duty. We have to show the generations that we are teaching, that we are also leaving them a seed, even if it costs us our life, even if we don't see it ourselves. And so we have to build a network of international solidarity where we respect our autonomy, where we also build our equity. And basically, just to finish off, I want to say that the people united will never be defeated. And as young people, we are the bearers also of this struggle. We are the fruits of the resistance. And so I want you to know that your struggle is my struggle, that your pain is my pain, and you must also feel it that same way. If you don't understand my pain, then we are wasting our time here. And we are in a context in which we have to grow and unite. And as I said, we are the indigenous people of Africa, of Asia, and Abya Yala. And they can try and wake us out like the Banamo, but we will grow. We live to resist, and we resist because we live. We have to continue building these ties and build power. It's not leaving with just our words, but you have to leave with a commitment. You can't just be here listening. And so that is our commitment to change.
Amanda.
Gawe.
So the response is Gawe to the power is ours. That is what I'm saying means. And I am starting with this greeting, particularly taking from my sister from Peru to actually highlight that we are not standing before you to cry about the issues that we live back home, but to actually highlight the fact that we are on the front lines, we are fighting, and we are very much strong. But we also see the need to go and educate the rest of the world about what is happening in our communities. So that when they come and they judge and they say this and this and this and that about Africa, about Abya Yala, and about Asia, and all oppressed communities for that matter, we would have actually taken the time to actually come and engage with them.
My name is Piwaba Madokwe. I am from a country at the tip of the African continent, a country without a name, called South Africa, which is just a mere geographical location. But the actual name of that country, known by the indigenous people there, is Azania. However, because of the very problematic concessions that were made by the so-called ruling party leading into the 1994 democratic dispensation of our country, a lot of compromise was made. And it is not only the identity in the name of our country that has been erased, but it is also our identity as the indigenous of that country. I know we'll at a later stage be speaking specifically on fascism, but I think it is important that I highlight that fascism is one of many branches of how coloniality has entrenched and embedded itself. It is not an individual action or an action of individuals, as people would want to actually put it out there. And it is specific people who are at the receiving end of all those actions. People of a specific ethnicities, of specific skin colors. And we must be able to ask ourselves why that is the case at this point in time. Fascism, racism, coloniality do not operate without the facilitation and without the protection of our national governments or our national states. And that is why I say that it is not just individual actions. And we therefore have a responsibility to hold accountable those that we put in power through vote or whatever the case is, to hold them accountable for the actions that they actually put on various communities. We have a situation where we are told that people in Africa, people in Abya Yala, people in Asia, are people in so-called post-colonies. But the reality is that coloniality never left our shores. If anything, it has refashioned and refurbished itself, and it is still there today. And therefore, the battles that we are fighting are not battles that are new. It is not battles of 10 years ago, of 20 years ago, of 50 years ago. We are standing on the shoulders of people who have been fighting, of giants who have been fighting these battles for hundreds of years. The stories that I am telling you at this point in time are stories that my grandmother would tell you, her great-grandmother would tell you, and which therefore means that something at one point has got to give. As I said, I come from a country called South Africa. And I mean, I always keep saying that you can Google. South Africa is actually considered one of the most unequal countries in the world. And that inequality, we cannot discuss it without actually looking at the racial undertones of it. The haves are explicitly white, the have-nots are explicitly black. So when we say that it is an unequal country or the most unequal, we must also call it for what it is, and that it is one of the most racist countries in the world as well. And to put it more bluntly, the first thing that those who came to our shores took, it was our land. They took everything beneath it, they took everything on top of it. And they displaced our people. And that displacement is ongoing. The most noteworthy and most recent example is that while there are serious calls in this country against the monarchy, Prince William is in South Africa doing what we know to be a PR stunt, doing what we know which would be a cherub going to whenever there are problems and you are running from accountability, you go and do some charitable event for the Africans, the poor Africans on the African continent. But a week before he came, there was a major clean-up of the CBD, which is Cape Town, central Cape Town, where homeless people in their hundreds were evicted and removed. And those homeless people, by the way, did not just become homeless by chance. And it is not only also people who just came to the CBD, but it is people who have been in central Cape Town, in the CBD, for generations, but have however been systematically removed through gentrification and all kinds of laws to make way for tourism, to make way for whiteness in the center of Cape Town, while our people are actually still being pushed out into the periphery. This is a reality in 2024. But some of you, when you know the history of South Africa, you would relate very well with the forced removal of our people from areas such as District 6. Those removals are still happening. And at this time, they are happening to a certain extent to the benefit of some of your people. Land ownership in South Africa. South Africans racialized as white, who only make 7% of the population. They still own 82%, roughly 80% of the land. That is private ownership. South Africans who are racialized as black, who make up about 70% of the population, only own 4% of the land. This is in 2024. And that is the root of our inequality, because if you are going to put such a number of people in small parcels of land, pack them up as sardines, you are of course going to get the problems that we get in our country. Our government, hence I said that fascism to a certain extent and racism do not operate in isolation. And neither does coloniality. But our governments and our states, which are an extension again and an arm of coloniality, they are the ones that are refusing. It's not that they are failing, they are refusing because they're an arm of coloniality to actually fix and address the atrocities and the inequality that is happening in our areas, in our communities. They do not want to upset investors, we are told, that should we bring you here, should we give you your land, should we give you your mines, including the ones that are now being discovered at this point in time. We will upset the investors. And we know very well who those investors are. So which therefore means that even the interests of those who are in office are not the interests of the indigenous people in our land. And some of you may even ask, what about elections? We went to elections recently. And South Africans overwhelmingly rejected the ruling party, which is the ANC. There is not a single party in South Africa that won the elections in these previous elections. However, there needed to be arrangements so that people can cling into power and continue with subjugating and putting our people through suffering. There was an option to stand with other political parties and other organizations who have the best interests of black people. There was an option to go into government with racist right-wing political parties. And the African National Congress, which we are told, or the world is told, is a liberation movement, chose racism, chose right-wing, it chose apartheid over its own people. And whatever our people had voted for came again. Every time I speak, I look at those two posters over there. And I don't want to lie, they are quite traumatic to me. I don't know, maybe if it was a different picture, because even the eyes are just on another level. But nonetheless, we are told that the likes of Nelson Mandela are heroes. We do not know them to be heroes because I have just told you the reality of black South Africans in South Africa right now. 30 years after we were told that the likes of him liberated our people. That is not the case. They were tools of coloniality to continue making arrangements that were against the interests of our people. In South Africa, you have a very racist, very right-wing, and very fascist lobby group known as the AfriForum, which I know maybe some of you have heard it as people who have been going around educating you and informing you about how the black savages in South Africa are killing their people in their farms, talking about white genocide. But the crime statistics in South Africa spell a different issue. They dispel that lie. South Africa is historically violent. There is crime, there is violence, but also we need to be able to locate historically how those violent crimes actually came to our country. Because if we do not confront that and why they continue happening, we are going to have a serious problem. Now, you have your AfriForum, you have your Democratic Alliance, which is a political party which is in government right now, thanks to the African National Congress. You have the Freedom Front, which is also a political party which is government right now, thanks to the African National Congress, who are explicit even in their policies, who will tell you that their interests are only the interests of the white minority in South Africa. over the interests of the black majority, which has been fighting, by the way. Like I said, we are standing here continuing a fight that has been going on for hundreds of years. And there is a systematic grouping or a systematic alignment of those who are against us, who not only use the state, but use their legitimacy as organizations to continue subduing us. And I am mentioning these three groups specifically because just recently, I think on Thursday, there was a march which also made international news called the Bella Bill March, where they took to the streets to march against a law that says, or two sections, by the way, of this law, which number one say that school governing bodies must not have sole monopoly or discretion in terms of who must go to the schools and the language policies of those schools. Because since then, we have had schools that explicitly teach in Afrikaans and in isolation of African students or learners. This bill also says that schools must also teach in the most spoken language in a particular province. It is a fair ask to actually just ask to be taught in our languages. My sister from Peru just said so now, that we have been made to look down upon our languages, to look down upon our identities, and to praise the languages of our colonizers. And that is still ongoing. I think my colleagues can also attest to this, that in the previous sessions that I have been speaking about, I have also highlighted how the state itself is complicit to this. Because instead of signing this law, the law was signed, by the way, by our president. But then he said there's still room to negotiate these two sections, and therefore we're going to put them aside. Because everything that is done in South Africa must appease white people over our own people. It is not only in the languages of ourselves where this is found. My brother here, who started this session, speaks a language that in South Africa is not even considered a language. When you speak about official languages of South Africa, the languages of the descendants of the San and the Khoikhoi people are not even considered as languages. We do not even know them ourselves. We do not know just what is the languages. We know that there are roughly 20-something languages. We do not know what those languages are. They are not spoken. They are not considered. It is the indigenous people who are actually working tirelessly to preserve and archive their own languages. And that is 30 years into so-called democracy, which therefore means that there is an effort to continue erasing. There is an effort to continue the erasure of our people. And more than anything, to divide us as well. Now, there are a lot of examples that one can make, speaking about South Africa in particular, and the challenges that are happening there. But I chose to speak on education for now, and language, because like I said, that is what is on the mainstream news. But that is not the only thing that is there. Hence, I spoke about land and many other issues. But it is also important that as we speak from a level of this is what is wrong that is being done to our people, that I do not forget to pay honor to the youth of 1976, which stood up in arms, literal arms, by the way. It's important that I highlight that it was literal arms, to fight against them being forced to be taught in Afrikaans. That was in 1976. School children were shot by the apartheid police. Every 16th of June, we are told, or we are made by our government to commemorate those people. During the height of Fees Must Fall, we had a call which was also Afrikaans Must Fall, because we found as well that the culture of Afrikaans did not just live in our communities. And using Afrikaans to exclude our people from entering specific places reserved only for white bodies did not just end in our communities. But there were 2 universities that were still teaching in Afrikaans to the exclusion of the majority of our people. Hence, Afrikaans Must Fall, which was also started by members of students in the different University of Pretoria and Free State. And it is very important that we highlight that as well, to show that the call or the resistance towards calling for our inclusion and our recognition in our institutions which are on our land has been ongoing for a very long time. But we know, like I said, what happened in 1976. We also know what happened during Fees Must Fall, when students were shot at, were arrested, were expelled for making a right call, not just for Africans, but for free education, for insourcing, and for various other calls. You had in 2017, going back to the AfriForum, where they rounded up each other and made a massive march in 2017, where they closed off highways and they protested for their right to continue above everything else to display their Afrikaans or their old South African flag, which is a flag that is deeply offensive to our people, because it is a flag that is celebrating the killing, the displacement, and the erasure of Africans on their country. When those white people took to the streets, they were allowed to do as they please. 1976, black people were shot at. 2015, 2017, arrests, shot at, expulsions. 2017, the world, that Monday came and went as if nothing happened. And that is why I started by highlighting how South Africa is a deeply racist country. Because you have people who offend and continue offending us, and they go away and continue doing as they please without any consequences. Now, in addition to just going around the world and painting black people of South Africa as savages and people who just go around killing poor white people in farms, you would look at the stats and even what is the actual state of farms in South Africa and farm matters in South Africa. And every other story that comes out, it is usually a white friend, a white relative, a white community member who's a perpetrator. Or it is black farm dwellers or farm workers who are victims. And it is not what is being perpetrated into the world. An example, going again to 2017, you have what you call the famous coffin case, where white farmers actually filmed themselves beating up a black person and putting them alive and burying them alive in a coffin. In 2021, you have the story of the Coca brothers, who were also from Mpumalanga, who were shot at and killed for confronting their employer. At the beginning of this year, you had 2 black women who were shot at and fed to pigs by white farm workers, farm owners, I meant to say. And we are told that they had been moving from farm to farm looking for food. They were shot at and killed and fed to pigs. That is recorded, it is there. Not the stories and the lies that they want to tell the people. Just towards the 30th of September, a 6-year-old was run over for stealing oranges. And this is not the first time. You also have children who have been killed for stealing corn. You have children who have been killed for stealing sunflowers. And some people can actually justify that the anger warranted them being killed. And the question then that we have is that you have a very violent history recorded of black South Africans and all the atrocities that they have experienced. Even before 1652 for that matter. Where their land has been taken, where they've been removed and all sorts of things. Those are high-level crimes. And the perpetrators or the direct beneficiaries of those crimes are killing our children for stealing oranges. And the world has not even bothered to ask, how are you holding accountable? Or what punishment is there for those who have killed and have been killing our people for hundreds of years and continue to do so, by the way? I just wanted to highlight that these are actual people. I even said names to show that these are not fictional characters, but actual people, as opposed to what the AfriForum keeps going around the world to actually fundraise. And they actually get a lot of support. They get a lot of money. And that money that they get, they come back to rain more terror upon us. There is a film or a documentary called Fatherland, which you can also get on YouTube, which speaks to white Afrikaner boys who are told that they are being taken to initiation camp, but when they get there, they are actually being trained to kill black people. It is one camp that was exposed, but we know that there are many other camps of such across the country. So what AfriForum has done primarily was that the money that they've been able to get from creating this myth that they are being killed, they have gone back to highly militarize and train each other for God knows why. And I will not say for God knows why, because around 2021, you can Google Senegal police station protests. You can also Google Brackenfell protests, Brackenfell high school protests. And one of the reasons why these racist right-wing protests are never confronted by the state, it is because they come with arms and they do not think twice about killing people and shooting people. And that is why they are running around getting that money. So that money is actually funding syndicates, by the way, as well. It is not only for arms. Just recently, one of the largest drug busts in South Africa, which was around 2 billion rand, was actually located to the AfriForum. That the farm and the person who was running that was actually an AfriForum member. So some of the money that they are given by the international community goes to fund the type of terror on our people. AfriForum has been at the center of sex trafficking, of human trafficking, and all sorts of crimes that one can imagine on our people. They are called a fascist group. We are led to think that it is just actions of individuals, but they are just a symptom, or they are just an arm of how the system actually works. Because they are not only just protected by the states, but the states themselves are an arm, or they are enacting on what coloniality actually expects them to do. Oppressed people across the world. That's why I said at first we need to ask ourselves the question of who are at the receiving end of fascism, of racism, of coloniality in general. It is a specific ethnicities, it is a specific skin color. Who is benefiting from those actions? And again, I said we did not come here to play victim. We did not come here to say sad stories or to share sad stories, but to give a perspective that many are scared to. We are here to give a perspective that many are not aware of. And I am explicitly saying go to Google. That's why everything that I speak to, I say find, because it's there. It's not things, it's not figment of my imagination. Including the land ownership stats. If you Google the land, I think it's a land distribution report of South Africa, you will get that. I think the last one that was produced was in 2020. This is where all those stats come from. South Africa, most unequal country in the world, you Google it, it's there. So we're not here to just tell stories, but to actually give a perspective that perhaps some of you would have known. And maybe if we come from our countries and we actually come and testify that what you read is actually the truth. And even more, because some of the things that are happening in our countries are not even documented. I remember in 2020, we went to the Free State under the political party that I am a member of, which is the Economic Freedom Fighters in South Africa. However, I have said to my colleagues as well that I am not coming here to represent an organization. Even the groups of organizations that we are working with collectively, I have not said I'm a member or I'm representing this particular group, because I stand here to try and represent all the voices of South Africa. I have led at grassroots level. I have led as a Secretary General of the Students' Command at the height of Fees Must Fall. I have been a member of Parliament. There is not a corner of South Africa that I do not know. And wherever I am deployed, I always make sure that I go to the most remote areas, because those are the people whose voices are not even heard or known by even those that try and say that they represent our people. So I am standing here to bring as many perspectives as possible. Hence, one must not look at me as what political party are you coming from, or what organization. I am standing here as a person, a black person, who is actually led by their conviction and knowing that something has to be done. I am standing here as someone who is at the receiving end of all these things that I have highlighted here and have experienced some of them. So in 2020, we convened a meeting similar to this, but it had way more people. We had called farm workers and farm dwellers. We had not expected that number, by the way, nor those geographic. We had people in their 70s, in their 80s of age, crying and breaking down in front of us, telling us what are their experiences? What were their experiences during apartheid, and what were their current experiences at this present time? At the hands of not only the farmers, but also at the hands of the state. Where they would tell us that there's one woman I remember, she even traveled from another province. She was in her 80s and she said, as I am here today, my husband is on a deathbed. And the farm owner has told me, even though we have stayed there for generations, that the moment my husband dies, he's going to kick us, all of us, out. Because the only link between us and him is my husband. This is someone in her 80s who does not know where else to go, who has experienced all sorts of atrocities, and who felt the need to cross provinces and to tell this story. You have people who will tell you, I remember one old man, he was also in his 70s, and he says, I wake up every day because the farm owner, because there was an arrangement that was discussed during these very problematic concessions of that guy. That we have 5 cattle. My cattle, they walk around the hills. And every day at 4 a.m. I wake up and I make sure that they do not get hit by the cars. I make sure that they do not get stolen. He has a herd of about 90 cattle that he has to overlook. But according to the records, he has been allocated land in this land distribution program of the ANC. And when he goes to the police to report these types of challenges that they have, no one actually responds. They are told to go and battle it on their own. And there were hundreds of these stories that I think that we need to actually try to record properly and actually distribute as well, so that people can understand that there is a side of South Africa that people have not even had an opportunity to see. These stories, I do not want to lie, they deeply traumatized me. I think for days I could not even stomach some of the things that I had heard. And that is why one has not even gotten back, 4 years later, gotten back to that body of work. Yes, there are people who are intervening and working, but to actually properly record and archive that work, it's been very difficult. We have mining communities. When the West sneezes, it is us who get the fever. When you protest and you say you want wage increases, it is our governments who are told to close down schools and cut budgets on education, on health, and things that we need. When the West says we want just transition, it is our minerals that are exploited to support that call. It is our people who are being effectively displaced and evicted from their homes because there are specific minerals that need to be mined so that solar panels and wind turbines can be produced. But it is also us who are sitting in the dark, while the rest of the world has uninterrupted power. If there's one thing we know about South Africa, it is that of load shedding and frequent power cuts. But everything that should actually be keeping the lights on at home has been leaving our shores to keep the lights on for everyone else. And moreover, it is not only that we are watching our resources leave, but our environments are being degraded. Our water is polluted. People are dying of respiratory disease. There are areas in South Africa that when the mines start blasting, families quickly go and assemble in a particular area, because there's a very high chance that their houses might crack and they must fall. And then after those blastings have stopped, then they must go and fix the cracks. They must go and help each other rebuild their houses. This is in 2024. This is the lived reality of our people. There are people who do not even have access to water. Because the moment they open their taps, it is just brown, it is just polluted water that comes out. There are areas that do not even have water, it's just taps all over the place. Government is not even able to provide those people with water because they know what they have done with the water and what continues to happen to our water. That is the lived reality of our people. Old women, young people, everyone who has actually stood against these things. They've been silenced, killed. That is the lived reality of our people. And it is important that we have these conversations, like I said, with the international community. And it is not an us versus you conversation that we should have. It is a collective conversation of understanding that the oppressed people across the world are saying, please stop killing us. And for years, the response has been bad. And after that, there's been plenty of reasons of why we are deserving of the treatment that we've been getting. And that has to stop. The conversation that we are supposed to be having as a collective is us saying that stop killing us. And the international community with us conversing on how we can actually stop that harm. International solidarity is not just awareness, it's not just tweets. It is not even the outcomes of the International Criminal Justice Court. Because if that was the case, the hundreds of years of resistance by the people of Palestine at one point should have stopped. There's not a single person in the world who does not know what is happening in Palestine. But it has not stopped. Millions have been displaced in Sudan to make iPhones for us and all sorts of things. Same in the DRC. There's been ongoing wars because the West must be comforted. The West must have everything. There have been protests and resistance in your Mozambique, in your Kenya. My brother just spoke about what is happening in Ghana. Just last week, hundreds of Nigerian citizens were appearing before court, facing a death penalty for saying no. And of those hundreds, there were about 29 children who actually started fainting in court as an evidence of the treatment that they were getting in captivity. And the world is still just looking. So it is not enough for us to just come here and tell you these stories and tell you what is happening. But something has got to give. The same is happening in Abiyala. People were bombed out of Iraq. The world watched. They ran away. They came to these countries. When they get here, they get bullied and kicked and all sorts of things and told to go back home. Where should they go back to? Africans were not only enslaved and taken to Europe and America to build what many of you are benefiting from. But some were even called. Hey, we need people to come and build. Hey, we need you guys to come and participate in our economy. And now that everything is good and well, we start calling everyone immigrants, even those who have been here for generations. We start victimizing. We start harassing and torturing people. But these are people who have homes that have been destroyed. Some of these people have actually come and they were called into these lands. And I think to a certain extent, I remember having this conversation with Brother Corbina when I was asking what exactly is happening in the UK, because I'd seen it online. And I said, but if you're asking these people to leave, there's a lot that you took from us. So at the very least, say they must leave, but they must leave with what you took from our lands. The wealth that you are saying that they are benefiting from is actually our wealth. And therefore, whatever they have come here for actually belongs to them. And therefore, when you kick them out, you should at least say, okay, it's fine. We don't want anything. Take everything. Take everything. And then you must go back. Because Africa had civilizations before. Africa had universities. Africa had governance structures. Africa had education systems before the colonizers got there. And therefore it means that we would have been very far. I've heard some of the politicians here in Britain saying that they brought us English and therefore we must be grateful. They brought us civilization and therefore we must be grateful. And they are not even at the very least acknowledging all the chaos that they've actually brought to our shores. That up until today, by the way, is still happening. Look at the foreign-owned army bases on African shores, on the African continent. That is also something that you can just Google. Why do you have foreign army bases on African soil? What are they doing there? And why is it that they are mostly concentrated in the countries where our minerals are? And where they are unending wars. Why is the United States, why would it even write and say that our next target is the west coast of Africa? Ghana is actually said to be going to actually, is going to go to some of the most violent elections. But those elections are not just violent for the sake of. But because there are people who actually sat down somewhere in America, in Europe, and said, we want Ghana. Because there's a revolution that is happening in Mali, in Burkina Faso, and in Niger, where people are saying that we are tired, we want what is ours, where they've expelled all foreign powers and are actually fighting back. And the only way we can actually stop that impeding revolution to actually spread throughout the entire continent, we must surround these three countries. And we must exterminate anything that is there. We might be speaking about Palestine, but there's Palestine that is about to happen back there in Africa. And only because people say that we want these mines to benefit our people. We want our land. We do not need your army bases on our land. What is your response as the community, as the international community, particularly on the alliance of the Sahel states, where we are told that it's just hungry or war power mongering army generals who are leading that. But the organization that I am from, as well, I know I said that Paris actually went and engaged with indigenous communities in all three of those countries. And we saw for ourselves that that revolution is not just led by some army generals. It is actually led by the people. And it is fully supported by the people, the indigenous people of those three countries. So when the US and the UK and everyone else, they come and they put up those army bases and they are saying that they are responding to terrorists, you must know that those terrorists, it's people that look like me. It is people who actually said that we have had enough and they've decided to fight back. But unlike South Africa, which is led by cowards who have allowed all that belongs to us to be taken, they are led by fearless people who have said that we are going to stand by our people and fight for them. Thank you very much.
después de haber escuchado los panels, nosotros vamos a terminar con una consigna que dice así: somos todas las sangres.
Somos todas las sangres.
Todas las lenguas.
Todas las lenguas.
Semilla de mil colores.
Semilla de mil colores.
Un fuego ardiente.
Un fuego ardiente.
Que resiste y florece.
Que resiste y florece.
Somos todas las sangres.
Somos todas las sangres.
Todas las lenguas.
Todas las lenguas.
Semilla de mil colores.
Semilla de mil colores.
Un fuego ardiente.
Un fuego ardiente.
Que resiste y florece.
Que resiste y florece. We are all the bloods.
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 All the languages.
All the languages.
Seeds of many colors.
Seeds of many colors.
A burning fire.
A burning fire.
That resists and blooms.
That resists and blooms.
Divididos nos dominan. Divididos nos dominan.
Divididos nos dominan.
Divididos nos dominan.
Divided we lose.
Divided we lose.
Unidos venceremos.
Unidos venceremos.
Unidos y unidas venceremos.
Unidos y unidas venceremos. United we win.
United we win.
Somos un puño firme.
Somos un puño firme.
Somos un puño firme.
Somos un puño firme.
Que surge de los pueblos.
Que surge de los pueblos.
Que surge de los pueblos.
Que surge de los pueblos. A firm fist.
We are a firm fist.
That rises from the people.
That rises from the people.
Hayaya Kausachu Usurpaki.
Hayaya Kausachu Usurpaki.
Muchas gracias.
We're going to have a bit of space for questions, but we first wanted to invite a brother that's also here, that's also come a very long way from Kenya, Kuumba, to come and share with us also, because we know I want to also honor the struggles that you're bringing.
People power.
Our power.
Our power.
People power.
Yeah, thank you very much. So, my name is Kuumba Rotich from Sengwer indigenous peoples of Kenya. And you have heard the stories of the struggles of indigenous people from South Africa, from Peru, from Mexico. And those stories are our stories. Same story for us in Kenya, same story for the Sengwer people, same story for millions of other indigenous peoples around the world who we are being treated as second-class citizens. We are being exploited for millions of years, and now they have come for the very little that remained with us to take from us. But now it's not only our cries, but the exploitative, predatory, capitalist-driven activities are also matching all of us, both we are in the global south and also you here to our death. The earth is dying because of these activities, and that is why we have come to say that we must fight back together. We have been having these activities, and the big question has been, how does the international solidarity looks like? And I want to tell you, comrades, friends, that we need to organize, we need to resist. You must also resist from here. And what we have to do first is that we have been oppressed for too long that we no longer know that we are being oppressed. We think that it is by default, we think that it is our destiny, we think that it is our fate. But also for you here, millions of years, thousands of years, hundreds of years maybe, your ancestors were also dispossessed of their properties, were dispossessed of their lands. You have been confined to the cities. So we don't want to say that you have taken from us it is this system that they designed that I've taken even also from you. And so I know, like in the UK, I've been saying, I've talked with my friends, like 50%, 20% of your income goes to paying rent, goes to food. So you are basically just working for your survival. If you don't work for 1 month, you'll be homeless. If you don't work for 1 month, you have nothing to eat. So this is what the system have done. But they have blinded you not to see what they have taken from you. So yes, they are still taking from us now. And we need to stop this nonsense that have gone for far too long. And we have the numbers. We are in our millions. There are very few of them. They are riding on our backs. They are enjoying a party whereby we are banned and the tables in our backs. All we need to do, people, is to stand up and their little party is over. They are using us to fight each other. The people serving in the military is us. The people serving in the intelligence service is us. The people feeding the system is us. We must cut off feeding the system. So I don't want to say much. I just want to say, let's unite. Let's organize in our communities. When I go back, we are going to organize the resistance. What happened like 2 days when I was here? So we have this community called Ogiek community, who have not been evicted for like 24 years now. And it is one community that we have been looking at their story as example of success of how lands can be preserved when indigenous people are allowed to use the indigenous knowledge that they have practiced, they have mastered for millions of years to conserve the environment. But now, just when I was here like 2 days ago, the Minister of Environment announced that they are going to start a project of costing 612 million Kenyan shillings. They call them conservation project, which is actually forest conservation. And how these conservation projects happens, that is what I've discussed us a lot of our lands, is that they will declare a project and then they will evict indigenous people from those lands. And I was just talking with my colleagues today, and like that this land is so beautiful. The Ogiek people have preserved this land. There have been no evictions for 24 years. This is an eviction that we are not going to allow to happen. We are not going to allow that to happen because this is the last of the lands in Kenya that we can show really what indigenous people are capable of doing. So, and we are calling upon you that we are working with our friends, we are working to build this movement that we will resist this eviction with our lives if that is need to be. So let's unite, let's fight the system, we will win. Thank you.
So the program is adapting to the process. And so we'll move the breakout groups together and have a break. But we first wanted to collect any questions and take them all at the same time so that people have a chance to share their thoughts, reflections, interpretations, and questions.
And it really focused in on this conversation about the kind of I and the problem when people get very individualized, and that here in the West we're hyper individualized, we're very disconnected from each other, from our societies, from our communities, and we discussed what that means for our ability to get into struggle and to stay in struggle, to not burn out, and that kind of piece. And then we allowed Abuela to share some of the story from Peru about their struggle, and we noticed that every moment that she shared it, she talked about she talked about we, and yet we were mainly talking from the I. And really to understanding that piece of that as we enter this journey, we have to say, yes, let's be part of a global family, let's be part of this resistance, but if I don't end up speaking of myself as a we in a few years' time, then I'm still too individualized. And so it's find your people, find your group, get involved in the Bristol COSAG, join us in Stroud, get involved in loads of different ways, and walk that path from I to we to our resistance that really allows us to stay in this struggle and be part of it. There's a million different practical things that we can do, but we have to break that piece of being stuck on our own, because if we're trying to move into this struggle on our own, we're going to fail and we're going to fall out of it again, if that makes sense. So really embrace that as part of the journey. And let's join our family around the world. That was our key piece. Thanks, family.
We had quite similar, quite emotional reactions to that, I feel, as well as some real practical steps to take. And then we did another round answering the key question that was about how we can go about anti-imperial struggle in the southwest, or more specifically Bristol. So the key nuggets we got out of that was popularising and making visible the struggles that we see here and elsewhere around the world. Having an understanding of what tangible actions can be taken as well, and that was including using the skills that we all already have, using those creatively to move towards action and to change things. Another one was creating communities of care locally and globally. So having those communities that can support us in struggle here, but also with the understanding that those communities extend globally as well. Breaking out of individualization, similarly to what Robin was just saying, and finally spreading understandings of the capitalist imperial machine in the southwest and elsewhere. So taking this sort of systematic approach, as well as seeing that we're all connected to each other through an internationalist lens.
So there's a lot of echoes around in terms of what we shared and what came up. There was a lot of really positive response to what was shared by the panel, and there was some sharing around when incidents happen that occur in the media, that there's a swell of passion, and then sometimes that passion can drop away. So it's how do we sustain the movement and not just be reactive? And something that came up that I felt was really important was, yes, there's a lot of compassion around what's happening, and a need to build a shared vision around what to do about it. And I think that's what I'm hearing anyway, that what are those steps? And so we were talking about how can things be changed in the UK, and how can we create greater understanding around how we are complicit in the harm that's done globally, to build a curriculum around that understanding and do knowledge sharing around that. And there's this kind of eldership, lack of connection to the land, and how everyone's a victim of this. So that's a global struggle, is that we are also victims of a kind of a colonist perspective. Yeah, issues around mass hopelessness, apathy, and lack of connected movement building, and lack of trust, and then lack of mass mobilization, and that there was some talk around how people are quite comfortable in this country, and people don't tend to do things when they're comfortable. So we were just noticing that. And we were also talking about a lack of understanding of where we've come from, and how we are, originally in England from Celtic tribes, and that we are connected globally. And it's not true that we're not. We just don't remember what that really means. And the lack of eldership in the space around a lot of young people who are giving their time and energy to solidarity building. And actually, how do we elder those people? Because we don't have strong eldership in this country. So how could we put that in place? That's probably enough for me. Thank you.
So there was quite a lot of conversations about the actual practical communication networks that need to be built in order to allow networks of solidarity like this to be built. Making sure that communities of struggle know each other, and an acknowledgement that quite a lot of the mass media is controlled by the state or by the companies, which makes it fundamentally unreliable. And the fact that leaders of governments collude together across states to quash resistance that's happening. Just an acknowledgement of how this might actually be easier now that there's communication loops have grown shorter through the use of technology, and how we can build those networks ourselves. And the need for open and direct communication between peoples to create the true propagation of information. There was one of the folks in our group had a podcast or a radio show and was talking about the uses of those to amplify. And then we also had Omar from Radio Sofoti in our group, wow, that's loud, who contributed to the conversation there. And yeah, there was some practical conversations about different doctors' organisations. There was a sister from the one of the XR doctors groups who wanted to talk about the medical profession and their complicity.
Hi, my name is Janet. I am representing Venezuela and the ancestors of Venezuela, which are gonna come through me. I channel songs, so they come through in the moment, and I sing them in my soul's language, so which is connected to the indigenous people from Venezuela. So they are very, very healing songs, really powerful. So I hope that you like them and receive them. I'm also gonna be singing other songs in English as well that I've written over the years. So yeah, so this is medicine music. Hope that you like it.
What an amazing performance! Ladies, pick up yourself.
There's a duty to also take up this commitment, and so basically the way that we're going to be working on the forward from this is that obviously we've got people's contacts. We really want, and we're going to also collect this information. For example, people that have the different skills, aptitudes, etc. We need that all, whether people are musicians, doctors, lawyers, etc., artists. We need all the skills, right? And we actually need to begin to work, and because there's a lot of very tangible work to be done. And so the Preparatory Commission of the doc is going to be coming back and actually connecting with people, making sure that people can know what the next programs of work is that people engage with, so that we can actually follow on with these conversations.